This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Life is a workout, and Smoothie King is here to help you power through. Whether you're grinding out bicep curls, or muscling the couch across the living room, crushing morning miles, or sprinting through back-to-back meetings, Smoothie King has fuel to help you maximize your workouts, own your recovery, and elevate your game. Give your body the energy, protein, and power it needs with a lineup of delicious smoothies made to help you conquer your goals. Only at Smoothie King.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is the highlight of your weekend. It is the highlight of my weekend to be in front of this microphone to talk to you about what is going on with the economy, a little bit about politics. We like to, as I like to say, we try to make economics fun. We try to make it entertaining and understandable, something that 95% of economists around the country are incapable of doing. You know, everybody, when I tell people I'm an economist, people like run away from me because they're so intimidated by economics. Why is that? Why have economists made economics, which is really so simple and easy to understand and logical? Why have they developed all these crazy econometric formulas and this and that, half of which are wrong, and people's eyes glaze over, and then they say, I hate economics. Well, economics is simple. You know, if you tax something, you're going to get less of it. If you tax something less, you get more of it. Demand curves are downward sloping. When the price of something goes down, people want more of it. When the price of something goes up, they're going to want buy less of it. If the cost of something, producing something goes down, we'll produce more of it, et cetera, et cetera. These are really simple concepts, and we try to keep economics logical and simple on the show. Beautiful weekend around the country. I know our affiliates are picking up the show at different times during the weekend, but on the East Coast, it is absolutely beautiful weekend. So I always say this: after you're done listening to the More Money Show, be sure to get outside and enjoy the fresh air and the sunshine, and get some exercise, because those are the best things you can do to stay healthy. By the way, if I sound a little stuffed up, I am. I don't know how I got this summer cold, but I am a little bit stuffed up, so sorry about that. I'll try not to sneeze while I'm doing the show today. By the way, the summer colds sometimes be worse than the colds you get in the winter. I don't know, they just kind of make you feel a little lethargic, and I'm all stuffed up in the head, and about 24 or 48 hours, I should be all better. So a lot to talk about this afternoon. Listen, first of all, one of the things that's at the top of my mind, tomorrow is the funeral of one of the great, great, great Americans of the last 50 years, and that is the great Ed Feulner. Ed Feulner was the founder and creator of the Heritage Foundation, the most important conservative think tank in the country, maybe in the world. I've been really honored to be associated with Heritage for a lot of my career. I arrived in Washington in 1983, late 1983. So that's a little over, let me do the math there, a little over 40 years ago. And Ed Feulner is the guy who gave me my start. You know, as a snot-nosed, pimple-faced kid, I think I was 23 years old, didn't know anything about anything, but Ed Feulner gave me my start. I don't know what he saw in me. I think he just saw a lot of opportunity, and maybe I wouldn't leave him alone, but he hired me as a research assistant, and then I became the budget analyst at Heritage, and then went on to bigger and better things. So I'm so appreciative of Ed Feulner. And not only was a great American for so many reasons. I mean, the Heritage Foundation was the think tank for the Reagan Revolution, and gave Reagan a lot of the great ideas that really rebuilt the American economy and also defeated communism. But all throughout the succeeding decades, Heritage has become more and more influential. And so Ed Feulner's passing is a very sad thing. The funeral is tomorrow. I will be headed out to that because I don't like going to funerals. I don't, but I just am so, he had such a big impact on my life. So Ed, I know you're right now probably passing right through those pearly gates, as you should. So a couple of other things. Highlight of my week, my month, my year, maybe my life was, some of you may have heard about this, but the other day, Donald Trump invited me over to the White House and the Oval Office. And I had a meeting with him for, I'd say it went on for almost an hour. And it was just myself and Donald Trump and one of his top aides. And we just talked about the economy, what was going on in the world. And I had come in with a bunch of these charts that we had made. And they showed how the economy was doing and a lot of data that the president was not aware of and that had not been published yet. And so I came in with these charts and Trump loved them, it was big charts, so he could really see them and get the gist of them. And we put on a big poster size thing. And I think there were 5 or 6 of these. My accomplice, Jackson Avery, helped put those together. And we showed it to him, and Trump got very excited about what was happening with income, what was happening with the well-being of American families while he was president in his first term and then a second term. And so in the midst of our discussion, he says, wait a minute. He said to Natalie, his assistant, why don't we have a press conference? And I'm like stammering, huh? I was, what? And he said, why don't we just call the press in? Because, when you're in the Oval Office, what's happening is the press is always 24/7 on call there. And there are usually 30 or 40 reporters with 15 cameramen standing out there waiting to be allowed in, every time Trump has one of these impromptu press conferences. So sure enough, 3 minutes. And I said, well, Mr. President, we don't really have to do this now. I was really nervous. I was not prepared. And he said, oh, no. Well, let's do this. It's great. I love your stuff. And he brought he had his assistant bring in an easel so we could put the like a stand for the posters. And, he calls them in and I'm kind of shaking in my boots and stammering. And Donald Trump says, when all these reporters, all 40 of the reporters and 15 cameras, I've never seen so many cameras, and they're all pointing right in my face. And he says, Steve, you stand here and I'm going to stand here. I was on one side of the posters and he was on the other. They said, well, folks, this is a press conference and now I'm going to turn it over to Steve Moore. And I didn't know what to say. And I luckily, I kind of rallied a little bit there. And I said, well, Mr. President, these posters and this data really shows what a success you've been as president. And so, one of the posters showed, for example, that in the first 5 months that Trump has been in office this term, we have the data available to show that the average family has gained about over $1,000 in income, adjusted for inflation in 5 months. That's a good number. That's like $200 a month of additional income. That's good stuff. And so, I showed that chart and he loved that one. And then he picks up the chart, takes it off the easel, puts the other one on. And this one shows that what happened under we looked at median income. So remember, median is the average family in the United States and exactly the middle of the income spectrum, the 50 to 51% range. And so what that showed was that under Biden, for the median family income, because of the disaster of the high inflation under Biden, that incomes over 4 years, the average income of the average family in the United States grew. Are you ready for this? About, I don't remember the exact number, so but it was somewhere around $500 or $600 over 4 years. That's nothing. It's close to zero. In other words, people didn't see any income gain virtually at all in 4 years. That's the reason Biden, Kamala Harris lost, is because people didn't get any income gain over 4 years after adjusting for the 25% increases in prices. And then I showed what happened under Trump. And this is an amazing story because in his first term, the income was up about $6,500 in real terms in Trump's first 3 years in office. I mean, it was just booming. And then what happened, of course, was we got COVID. And so COVID dragged, because we did the idiotic thing that we can never do again, one of the most catastrophic decisions in American history, the shutting down of the American economy. And we did that, incomes fell. But even when you take into account the COVID year, incomes were up about $6,000 over 4 years under Trump. So think about this, folks. Up $6,000 real median income under Trump, up only $500 under Biden, a 10 times bigger increase in median income. That's the middle class under Trump than Biden. And then I showed what happened to the lowest income group, the bottom 25%. Guess what? They lost income under Biden. In other words, Biden made the poor poorer. And the reason he made the poor poorer was because he let the inflation rate go up so much. And I've said this over and over again. Inflation is the cruelest tax. It's a regressive tax. It hurts the poor the most. And lower middle income people got hammered as well. So there was a big reduction under Biden in the lowest income group income. And guess what? Under Trump, it went up. And in fact, in adjusted for inflation terms and in percentage terms, the poor got richer at a faster pace than the rich got richer in terms of percentage increases in income. That's a hell of a story. And so anyway, it was so cool being in there with the president. He could not have been nicer. He's in great mood, folks. He's loving life right now. He's on a roll. This guy is on a roll. I'm here to tell you. And I know, look, I told Trump, I don't like some of your policies, sir, but I really think most of what you're doing has been fantastic. We talked about the fact hundreds of billions of dollars of investment is coming into this country. I told him he should hire Larry Kudlow to be on the Federal Reserve Board. I don't know if that's going to happen, but would there be anybody better than my good friend, that Boulder? I mean, my good friend Larry Kudlow. So we had a really profitable and discussion. Now I can die happy because I got to sit in the Oval Office. By the way, he has all these. He said, "Steve, what do you like? Do you like the way I've redecorated the Oval Office? Because every president comes in and redecorates." And he has all these portraits of the great presidents, Ronald Reagan and Jefferson and all of the great ones, even people like Polk and Abraham Lincoln, et cetera, et cetera. And I said to the president, I said, "These are great, Mr. President, but you're missing one president." He said, "Who's that?" I said, "Calvin Coolidge." And he was very proud. He said, "Was he a great president?" I said, "Yes, Mr. President. He gave us the Roaring 20s, and he was the one who cut the top tax rate from 70 to 25%. Anyway, it was a great time. He, by the way, has a big bust of another great American right next to his desk, and that, of course, is the great Ben Franklin. This is a great American. This is a great country, and God bless America. No doubt about that. We will be right back, folks. I'm in a good mood today, despite the fact that I've got a little bit of a raspy voice. This is The More Money Show.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I want to bring on a very good friend and a guy who really deserves the Medal of Freedom in America for serving as the chief of staff in the White House, in the Oval Office for Donald Trump in his first term, which must be about the hardest possible job you can have in this country. Mick, thanks for coming back on.
Oh, it was a piece of cake. I enjoyed every day of it. So how are you doing, Steve?
Yeah, well, so Mick is one of these people who could operate.
Come on, you were in the Oval Office yesterday, the day before.
Well, it was an amazing. That's why I wanted to have you on to talk to you a little bit about that. But before I say that, that means, Mick, you operate on what, 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night?
Actually, Steve, he was very good about that. He only sleeps about 4 hours a night. I remember when I took the job. I told him, I said, boss, most normal human beings can't do this. And he was very right. He was. So we did have an evening team. I worked from about 6 a.m. till about 8 p.m. And we had a team that came in about.
That's a long day. That's a 14-hour day. Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
So the reason I wanted to bring you on, by the way, Mick Mulvaney, of course, was a great congressman from the great state of South Carolina. And how long did you last as chief of staff? I mean, I know he just wears out people. How long were you there in the White House with him?
It's funny you ask. I lasted about 15 months, but Susie Wiles just passed Reince Priebus. Reince lasted till July 31st.
Yeah.
And so Susie's made it 8 months now. I made it 15. John Kelly made it about 20, but he didn't come in the last 3 or 4 months. Right. So I'm not sure that counts.
So tell us about, well, I did spend an hour with the president in the Oval Office. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on is one of the things that really impresses me about Donald Trump is that, I can go in there with an idea, or people can. You've seen it probably 1,000 times. And if you have a good idea, he's going to say, let's go for it. Let's do it. And that's what he was doing. So that's unusual for a president, but you probably saw that a lot.
I did. The challenge is that, if sometimes they're not really good ideas.
Hey, that's true. That's true.
Yours happened to be one. But
by the way, just let me interrupt for 1 second. I've always said about Trump, and this is true of, I've been around very, very successful CEOs as you have, and really, really smart people. And then the kind of people who have like 3 or 4 great ideas every day. and 2 or 3 of them are really good, and then one of them is really bad, and you have to say, these ones are the good ones, this is the bad one. Right?
I was always afraid when Newt Gingrich would go in, because Newt is an idea machine. I mean, he's got 25 a day, and some of them are really, really, really good. And every now and then you look at him and say, Newt, are we serious about that last one? So you have to be able to sort of screen out the wheat from the chaff, as they say.
Yeah. So you were there during the most economically productive period of Trump's first term. I don't know if you heard earlier, I was saying that in Trump's first term, we had a massive increase in real median household income of over $6,500. So congratulations. I mean, that was I think that was more than any president in history.
Well, it was. And I've talked about this before, that it proved supply side economics.
Yes.
That conversation should be over now. Supply side economics works. Because what did Trump do? He gets a lot of attention, and rightly so, for the tax policy and so forth. But really what went sort of the unsung hero of that phase was the deregulatory agenda, to make it easier to get goods and services to market. People can have a lot more money, and there still won't be a lot of inflation as long as you're bringing more goods and services to market. And that's what Trump 1.0 do. They're doing it again in the second term. It just takes a while for it to kick in.
When are you coming back to Washington? Yeah, I know Trump needs you back.
I try and avoid it in August for the most part. So I notice you're not spending a lot of time there either.
Well, it's really, I have to say, it's a really great team that he's put together. How well do you know Susie? I think she's doing a great job.
I don't, but I know a lot of people around there, and they're very pleased with the place is running. Keep in mind that the chief of staff sort of has 2 jobs. You're a senior policy advisor, but you're also the chief operating officer of that building. And everybody I've talked to said she's doing a great job on running the place. And that's what Trump likes, and that's what he wanted. I was good at it. She seems to be very good at it, and I've heard no complaints from anybody yet.
Talking to Mick Mulvaney, folks. This is the More Money Show, and we'll be right back.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Folks, this is the More Money Show. Thanks so much for joining as always. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. My guest this week is Jay Jackson. Jay has been on the show previously. He is the chairman and CEO of Abacus Global Management. You should check out their website, by the way. It's abacusgm.com. Jay is based in Orlando, Florida.
Right.
And I have a bunch of questions I want to ask him about managing your money and making more money. So, Jay, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for having me again.
So we talked a few weeks ago on this show about the insurance industry and the products that you can provide for our listeners, especially because you're right in that strike zone of the, most of our listeners are in their 50s, 60s, 70s. And so that's when they have to really start thinking about these things. I want to kind of personalize this and tell you that I just turned 65 earlier this year. So the first time I think, oh my gosh, I'm eligible for Social Security soon, and Medicare as well. So let's start with Social Security because the question everybody asks when they get to this age is, when do I start getting my benefits?
Right.
Can you provide some advice to people?
Sure.
What do you tell your clients when they turn 65? Is it best to? I've heard that it's best to wait and take the benefits later rather than take them. By the way, and you can also get early benefits, right, at age 62. So how do you help people make that decision?
We do, and the decision should be based on a customized solution for you. What we know is that everyone is so different. Their family history is different. Their genetics are different. Their lifespan is different. Right. And we do a lot of work retrieving medical documents, helping people better understand what their current lifespan might look like. Now, they can make changes, and that might extend things, but when you apply that to Social Security and you're going to delay payment, you wouldn't want to be in a situation where you delay payment and your lifespan, both historically and where you currently are health-wise, is shorter.
Yeah, because then you're giving up money.
You're just giving up money.
So you might as well take it now while you're alive.
Take it at 62 for that point.
Because you don't get much of a death benefit from Social Security.
That's right.
That's how the system makes money, is when you die early and then they get you paid into it for 40 years. So in that case, you want to take the benefits while
That's
you're
right.
in your early
So,
60s.
if you're 65 and you're approaching this decision and you look at your full medical profile, and one thing else I will say is that people are living longer, but not forever. Like, let's just start there. Like, one of the things I found super interesting is that, there's never been a centurion over 6 foot tall. So,
really?
Yeah. So just let it go. If you're 6'4", stop. Right?
That's
you're
amazing.
Not
Are you sure about
100.
that statistic?
Prove me wrong. I find any listener you got.
Good. Well, I'm 5'10".
Have them send you a letter. Have them find me. They're gonna
6'5".
I'm not going to get there. It's fine, right? Like I've let that go.
I'm sitting next to Jay, and he's a tall guy. And so,
man, if I
why
make
is
90,
that,
I'm happy, right?
Yeah.
Because your vascular system isn't designed,
Works differently,
right?
okay.
It's just there's going to be things that happen. Right? It is super rare.
So
if
the
you live
point
to
is,
100.
this is very important.
Yeah.
So you can advise someone like me or our listeners based on our family history, our weight, our height,
genetic history,
what's best
current
for
impairments.
you in terms of when you make these decisions.
That's right.
When do I take Social Security? What about what do I do about my life insurance policy?
All these things. Like,
but the government doesn't necessarily know that, and they don't adjust, but insurance companies do. Right.
It's really interesting. Insurance companies, if you really think about what they do, is that they underwrite at the beginning of what you might look at as a mortality distribution curve, right?
Right.
They don't look at the end. In fact, insurance-based tables, which are known, they call them VBT tables, end at age 95. Why? Because they're not really underwriting past that. So it doesn't matter to them.
Right.
We look at the entire complex of data because we want to know what happens past age 100 and how and why and what drives it. Now, when you start to think about, and we can touch on why the government doesn't have this data, we're going to sell it to them.
Yeah.
But the point being,
the government doesn't, like in the Social Security system, they don't really. Do they adjust for these kinds of things? Not on a personalized
and it's not
level.
just, you can compare the Social Security Administration to large pension funds across the country.
Yes.
It's the same thing. There's not a financial incentive for them to effectively go back and correct this data. Now, there is in a sense that it makes the pension fund much more robust and will go along much longer and manage those unfunded liabilities, just like Social Security Administration. I find it interesting that if we want to make an impact to the Social Security Administration, I would think that it would make a ton of sense if we had an idea of what the mortality was within Social Security. We all know that we think that they're overpaying by $1.3 billion. I think it's much higher based upon the data we have. We run and find and have one of the most robust mortality verification systems in the United States, where we can tell every single day within 48 hours and 99% accuracy when these and how these mortalities occur. The Social Security Administration is, we think, sub 50, maybe down to 30% accuracy after 9 months. So imagine the excess payments that are occurring. But with that said, let's go back to your audience member who's 65 and trying to make that decision.
That's me.
Right. and the first thing we tell them is have an honest look at yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Because what's happened is, and what I said was people are living longer, not forever. And what I mean by that is that at 65, there's a 50% greater probability you're going to live to 90. Than just 10 years ago. So you've got a really good chance of that life extension. When we many times share data with our clients and somebody who's in their 80s and we say, gosh, based upon your medical impairments, your history, genetics, all the things we spoke about, your probabilistic mean lifespan is around 7 years. You know what the number one response is? No way. Zero chance I'm living that long. You go back to your, magic 8 ball there, shake it up and give me a different answer because that's not right. And unfortunately, it is right. And the reason why is that we're built as a medical society to extend lifespan even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is crazy.
It's really kind of nonsense. But you start to now, though, see that number. And so if you're 65, what I would say to you is that you should take lifespan in. And I think that lifespan is going to be the next really impactful thing that happens in financial planning. If you're not taking into consideration your customized lifespan, not to age 95, but instead have somebody underwrite you, now you look at you, okay, well, where am I with my Social Security? Should I start to take that payment? Where should I be on my other investments? How am I going to fund, right, long-term care for myself? And really, it's your spouse.
I'm talking to Jay Jackson, who's the chairman and CEO of Abacus Global Management. I mean, why would they choose you? I mean, you've got hundreds of financial management. I mean, what's your kind of niche in that market?
They don't have the data.
They don't.
They don't have it. No one has it. We have it. We spent the last 20 years aggregating it, and that's why it's so valuable.
So that gives your clients a huge
massive advantage. that they're not getting anywhere else.
Yeah, amazing.
They can go to JP Morgan and Jamie Dimon's not telling them what their lifespan is. We are. And how is it possible that you're going to allocate $1 million or $2 million or $5 million plan and not know the denominator? Yeah. How long I'm going to be in the plan? It's nonsense.
Well, one thing that really, because I talk to our listeners every week, almost every week, and one concern that they express all the time, especially if they're in their 60s or 70s, is, am I going to run out of money?
Of course.
Am I going to go broke before I die?
Right.
And that is what keeps people up at night.
Of course it is.
So you help them.
We help them better
sure that
understand.
They don't go look in that account.
That's right. So if you set that plan out originally and you're 65 and we say, hey, based upon this probabilistic mean, Steve, of how you've taken care of yourself, family history, there is a greater than 50% probability you're living past age 85, and there's at least that potentially to age 90, your financial outlook has to look different than someone who has a financial outlook to age 80.
Yeah.
Right? And how you plan for that, how you save for that. And don't forget your spouse. Yeah. That gets left out of this equation so often because her mean lifespan is predominantly going to be longer than yours.
If you're a man, your wife is going to have a higher life expectancy. I mean, my wife can't wait for me to die. But,
that's not true. That's not true. That's not true.
I know she's probably listening to So, Jay, we just got about a minute left. Yeah. How do people get in touch with you guys?
You can go to abacusgm.com.
You don't have to live in Orlando.
No, we are a nationwide company.
Okay, got it.
We offer services on our website, abacusgm.com. We've got the four tiles that you can pick, and you can pick your own journey there as whether you want financial advice, whether you want to look at some of our investment funds or even consider some of the things we do in the life solutions area.
So what really brought me to Jay and why I thought you'd all be interested in hearing from him was this revelation that, my eyes almost popped out of my head when you said that there's, billions and billions of dollars people are just that you own, folks, that you own, that you're just not claiming with insurance products and so on. And you can clean that all up for people because they've had these policies for 25 years. They're not even paying attention to it.
Right.
You can consolidate it. And because you have so much of this data, mortality data, et cetera, you can kind of retrofit the plan for the
absolutely. I would say it's a customized solution for each individual. And as you go forward in financial planning, we have to think about customized solutions, not just for the individual, but customized financial products. And we're doing both.
That's Jay Jackson, Chairman, CEO of Abacus Global Management. Thanks for joining today, Jay. And we will be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC and affiliates throughout the country.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Thank you so much for joining. So I want to interview somebody who I think is one of the top financial gurus in the country, and that is Bob Payne of Payne Capital Management. Bob, thanks so much for joining again this week.
My pleasure, Steve. Always good to be with you.
So another tumultuous week for the market. I want to start, though, if I could, asking you about some of the goings-on in Washington. There's a big controversy, as you know, Bob, about what's happening with the labor statistics and the jobs reports. And the truth is that there have been huge variations and re-estimates of the numbers, and they tend to look to me to be more and more unreliable. And I wonder what your take is on this story. You've been in this business a long time, but we need reliable government data for investors, for the government programs, for the gauge of our economy. What do you make of this story?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Steve, and I'm glad you're taking a hard look at it because a lot of businesses depend on that, especially if you own your own business like I do. You depend on these numbers to be accurate. So I think it's been a long time coming that they don't just do these surveys, that they really give us some hard data. But I think anecdotally, what I'm hearing from my clients who are all over the country is that the economy is really resilient, and they're seeing a lack of good candidates. They have job openings and they can't fill them.
I hear that too, and I think it's a real problem that there are still 7 million job openings in this country. There are about the same number of people looking for jobs. The problem, it seems to me, Bob, is that the jobs that are available don't match the skills that are available.
No, that's true. I think that's been a big issue. But, Steve, I don't know what you majored in college, but I know most of my friends and most of the folks that I know and the statistics that I read that less than 25% of people employed today actually do anything that's related with what they learned in college or what their degree was in. So I think, on-the-job training is great. I think it's really frustrating for a lot of these folks looking for jobs saying, well, you're not experienced or, you're too experienced. So I think it's frustrating on the part of the job seeker, but more importantly, the people that are offering jobs are just looking for good candidates right now.
So I always ask this question of successful people. So I want to ask this question of you because you've been so successful in this. But how long has it been? 40 years? How many years have you been?
50 years. 50 years for me. 50 years, yep.
That's amazing. So congratulations on that. So
thank you.
The question I always ask is, what when you first got, your first jobs, what did you do when you started working? Were you in the financial business? What were some of your first jobs?
No, actually, for me, I've only been in this industry my whole career. I graduated in 1975, and our guidance counselor, believe it or not, was telling me that the only place you shouldn't look is on Wall Street, Bob, because
because it was a pretty bad market back then. Right.
It sure was. We had the 73, 74 bear market, right? The market was down 75%. It was a horrific bear market.
Yeah.
And everybody was leaving, and being a contrarian by heart, that's where I ended up. So I was lucky enough, I guess, or just they were desperate enough at Merrill Lynch. They needed people. So, I got hired as a rookie back in 1975, and the rest is history.
Well, those first few years must have been pretty brutal because there wasn't much action in the market back then.
Really wasn't.
Most of it was negative.
Yeah, it was. The market was, well, actually, if you think about it from an investor standpoint, the market was ripe. It was just, it was so dirt cheap. Right. But we also had a period of time where we had ultra high interest rates. We had high inflation.
Well, I remember.
And so fortunately, a lot of my clients back then who put a lot of trust in me, they were kind of like my guinea pigs. I was able to invest them in high yield utilities, certificates of deposit, municipal bonds. So income was important. And not knowing anything back then, which is funny, I didn't even have a down payment on a clue, to be honest with you, Steve. When my first day at Merrill Lynch, I got a Wall Street Journal. I'd never seen one before. I was looking for the sports section. When I couldn't find that, I was looking for the comics, and they had a couple of cartoons there, and they weren't very funny. So, it was really on the job learning for me.
And so so you were in the industry for a long time, and then when did you start Payne Capital Management?
Started Payne Capital Management about 20 years ago. Okay. It was fascinating because when I was at Merrill Lynch, I'll tell you what, after about 5 years, I thought, all they want me to do is sell the products that they create. Right, and it didn't make any sense to me. So I came up with a novel concept, Steve. Go to your client, sit down and find out what they need, and then work backwards and tell the firm what investment products they need to develop to get the client to their goals. So, long story short, I ended up becoming the advanced training program for Merrill Lynch and traveled all over the country, got a chance to train other advisors on the process and strategies that I used. And then after I figured it out, Ryan came to work. My son, Ryan, who's my partner at Payne Capital. Yeah. And he said, Dad, if you got it all figured out, why are we working for them? Let's have our own firm. And we launched Payne Capital Management 20 years ago, and it's been a tremendous success.
It sure has. So, there's a lesson, I think, that when you started, you started in a bear market, and then of course in the Reagan years we saw the massive spurt of earnings and spurt of market valuations, and we've seen that of late too. But you remain bullish. Stocks have done very, very well in the last few years. So, but you remain bullish even in these high, sometimes high. PE ratios.
Yeah, the only time that I ever really turned negative was back in 2007 when we had the housing bubble. You could see what was really happening. Since I also live in Florida and I live in New Jersey, and my son lives in Manhattan. We could see what was happening with the real estate market and how there was like an irrational exuberance, truly about real estate, and the market had taken on an irrational exuberance on its own. But the big mistake we made back then is I actually got everybody out of the market, which was insane. And, when the market bottomed in 2009, it was almost impossible to get them back in because they kept saying, Bob, you were right. Things are really bad. I said, no, everything's priced in. Things are going to get better. So what you want to do in any market is, and I'm very bullish right now, but I'm not bullish on everything. And you don't want to just be, all in just tech stocks right now, even though we're making a killing there. I'm very bullish on the rest of the world, the rest of the market, because there's extreme opportunities right now in investments, like blue chip dividend paying stocks are a great place to be right now. And, over that 50-year period, Steve, the best way to create wealth was to compound dividends in blue chip stocks. Of course. So they're on sale right now. So there's a lot of opportunity in the market. People should be very, very fully invested right now and very bullish. And the thing that I love, Steve, is that so many people have been bearish for the wrong reasons, right? And, you and I have been talking for years. And, a lot of their fellow economists, they were all, convinced that we were going to have a recession because we had an inverted yield curve. You just can't use
I never believed
indicator.
That.
No, you didn't.
I know. And you
were like the voice in the wilderness out there for the last 3 years.
The reason, Bob, I'd like to have you and Ryan on is because you've been more right than most of your competitors. I mean, you've been, even when people turned it bearish, you remained bullish throughout. And boy, has that paid off. So appreciate your sage advice, Bob. I hope to talk to you next week. That's Bob Payne of Payne Capital Management. This is the More Money Show, and we'll be right back.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I want to get right down to it with my good friend Mick Mulvaney. Was discussing a little bit earlier on the show some issues with respect to Trump. And you all know Mick Mulvaney. He was the chief of staff for Donald Trump, did amazing things with him. I think he was first or second longest serving chief of staff for Donald Trump. That's a very, very tough job, as you can imagine. You're probably on call 18 hours a day, if not 24 hours a day. Mick, thanks for sticking around. So I'm going to take callers, by the way, on our More Money hotline a little later in the hour. And that number is 1-800-848-9222. And the question of the day is, if you had 5 minutes in the Oval Office, as I did earlier this week with Donald Trump, what would you tell him? And maybe, Mick, I'll start with that question. You spent a lot of time in the Oval Office with Donald Trump. If you were to see him, next week, and you had a meeting with him, what advice would you give him at this point?
Trust and verify. I think a lot of people think they figured him out. We talked about that a little bit in the previous half hour. I mean, you see these CEOs coming in here. Tim Cook came in this week with that, whatever that gold thing was. And you sort of get the feeling
Tim Cook, of course, is the CEO of Apple. He met with Trump, Wednesday or Thursday, and he made an offer that he would invest a huge amount. I don't remember, $100 billion or something in the $800 billion. I don't even remember the number, but it was gigantic.
It was. It's a lot of it's in AI. Keep in mind, a lot of companies were already planning on spending that kind of money, and that's my point to the president. Mr. President, look. They're going to come in here. They're going to tell you what they think you want to hear. And granted, Apple investing a bunch of money in the United States is great news. Let's not get in the way of that.
Fantastic.
Let's make sure they follow up. Make sure they follow up. And because one of the things that Apple said in their announcement was that a lot of this investment wouldn't take place for at least 4 years. Yeah. Well, that's the end of the Trump term. So you got to wonder, are they hoping for a change in policy with the next people? So that's sort of my look. It's working. We'll talk a little bit. I know this segment about the tariffs and so forth, about how long a play he's got there. Things are going really, really well. But you want to make sure that people follow through on their promises, and that these aren't just hollow sort of things they're doing to sort of suck up the president.
Excellent point. I couldn't agree more. And I'd also say that has to do with these other countries. They've made hundreds of billions of dollars of promises, Mick. But and I mentioned this to the president. I said, well, Mr. President, what if they don't do it? I mean, a lot of these countries will promise the moon to you, but whether they actually follow through is a very different. That's why trust but verify is so important. And he said, "Look, I'm going to slap them with tariffs so they don't do this." But I wonder what your reaction is to that.
I had to say, I was thinking more about the relationship we have with Mitch McConnell when Mitch was the majority leader in the Senate when I was chief.
Yep.
And I always used to come in and tell the president a lot of things he wanted to hear. And I said, Mr. President, you have to realize that Mitch operates under what we call Plan B. He's like, what's that, Nick? And I said, he plans on being here a long time after you are gone. So you need to make sure that these people actually follow through on these things and they're not just trying to run out the clock on you. And I do it with foreign countries. I do it with private corporations. I do it with everybody. Actions in life generally, but especially in Washington, D.C., actions speak so much louder than words. Come in, say all the right things. I love it, but let's see where the tire hits the pavement.
You know, Mick, a couple of weeks ago, the president, you may have seen the film of this. He went over to the Federal Reserve and walked through the construction project. And it reminded me that this guy was a hell of a businessman, nobody knows more about construction than Donald Trump does. And, that was the $3.1 billion that Jerome Powell wants to spend renovating that building. And, the joke is he's building a Taj Mahal on Pennsylvania Avenue and he's going to have a hot tub in his office or something. But, Trump, you may have seen his comments, when they asked him about the $3.1 billion. And he said, I could probably, if I were running this, I could probably run it for about $3 billion less. So this guy's a fantastic businessman. And sometimes we forget that. And I believe that's part of the key to his success.
Well, it is. He's not a politician. I mean, he's only run for office, 3 times? So
right.
that you're not going to change somebody when they're 80 years old, Steve. I mean, you and I are getting there, but we're not there yet. But you're not going to do something, for your whole adult life and then turn 80 and go, oh, by the way, I'm going to turn over a new leaf. He is what he is, and it's worked for him in the private sector. It's working for him now. People just got to realize that everybody who goes to work for him thinking they're going to change Donald Trump is going to be dramatically disappointed.
One thing about Donald Trump, and you've spent so much time with him. I'm talking to Mick Mulvaney, a good friend, and who served the country so well as the chief of staff for Donald Trump. Probably the hardest job in America. You last how many months did you last? 18 months?
15. 15.
I can't imagine 15 months of doing that job. But you did an amazing job. And one of the things I've said about Trump, I've spent a little time with Trump. You've spent a lot of time with Donald Trump. But I've always said he's not just a great man, he's a good man. And I've seen so many instances personally of where he's done just things that are so big-hearted. And I wonder if you've got some examples of that you can tell people having worked alongside him for that 15-month period.
Yeah, I remember when I first went to work there, when I was the OMB director, 2017, 2018, I didn't know him very well. And I did notice that he didn't like to shake hands. And that we'd have world leaders come into the Oval Office, and he would stand behind the desk and wouldn't shake their hand. Of course, he's a germaphobe. He'll tell you who he is. He admits that. He's very good-natured about it. He just didn't like to shake hands. And then I remember I'm chief, and we're going down to see the border in Southern California along the Mexican border, the wall that we're building. And we're an hour late leaving because he shook hands with every single man and woman on that line, all the construction workers, all the CBP officers, all the guys on horseback. We were an hour late leaving because that's and people don't see that side of him. They really don't. He's got a connection with working people. I call him a $1 billion man of the people, which is stunning to me because I'm never going to be either of those things. But he does have that connection with folks that I don't think comes across all the time.
It's funny you should mention the not shaking of hands because there's a famous story when John F. Kennedy ran for president in 1960 and, of course, became president. He shook so many hands that his whole wrist and fingers became totally swollen, and his hand became almost inoperable. So I think it's probably a good policy for a president not to shake everyone's hands.
What's funny you say that because there is a glove. There is a glove. There's a presidential ice glove.
I didn't know that.
I learned about it with Obama because they shake so many hands at those Christmas parties and stuff like that they put their hand in the glove afterwards to keep the swelling down. I didn't realize that story about Kennedy. I wonder if that's where it started.
It may have. So you were there during the big boom period in 2017, 18, and 19. What years were you?
All the way up to COVID, yeah.
Yeah. And so were you there during COVID at all? Or
I was there for the very beginning of COVID. I ran the COVID task force before it was the COVID task force. That was an ordinary job of a chief of staff to run an interagency process. And that started in probably early January of 2020. And then I left right after Mike Pence took over that task force in sort of mid-March.
So I'm glad I wanted to ask you something about those early days and weeks of COVID, because I do believe that one of the greatest mistakes in the history of our country was the locking down of our businesses and our churches and our the schools, et cetera. I think it was an outrage. And Donald Trump, I remember in those first few weeks, but you were there with him, he was resisting that. He did not want to shut down the economy. But can you give us a sense of what what was going on at that period? Because it was such a historic period. And I think we made major mistakes. It was mostly the big blue states that shut down.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Anthony Fauci didn't tell him the truth.
Right.
At least didn't tell him the whole truth.
No, he didn't.
I mean, I found out afterwards, after I left the White House, that we have a textbook. We have a book on how to deal with a pandemic over at HHS. You do table talk exercises. You practice this.
Right.
And what the book will tell you is that you never, ever, ever, ever shut down the economy, because the damage done from that is so much worse than anything else. What you're supposed to do is find the most at-risk populations. Sometimes it's children, sometimes it's sick adults, whatever, and you isolate them so the rest of the world can continue going. And Fauci never told the president that. Not a single time. Fauci, from the very beginning, we need to shut down, we need to shut down, we need to shut down. And when you start telling the president of the United States, Mr. President, if you don't shut down, millions of people are going to die, you can imagine how a president reacts to that. So, no, I absolutely blame Tony Fauci for not being complete. Tony made the decision as opposed to giving the president the right information and letting the president make the decision.
I think he intentionally. I think he was the. Look, I think Anthony Fauci was the Benedict Arnold of our time. What he did to our country was so outrageous. He lied through his teeth. He was complicit in the whole thing was outrageous. Trump had the right instincts. I wish he had stuck with it, because it was a huge blow to the economy. And he would have, this, by the way, Mick, if it had not been for COVID, Trump would have won a 40-state reelection landslide. I mean, the economy was doing so well. We had peace around. I mean, every one of his policies was working. And that's why I'm not a conspiracy guy, but I think it was people like Anthony Fauci and others that were using COVID to try to trip up his presidency.
We certainly had that polling data. I remember very vividly, January of 2020, Bernie Sanders was sort of ascendant. The Democrats hadn't had any real primaries yet, but he was doing really well in the early polling, and we had great data on Trump versus Bernie in 2020, and we would have won 42 states.
Wow.
So, including, I think, New Jersey. I still don't think we win New York, but I think New Jersey was in our column under that scenario.
So one last thing on the way out, and thanks so much, Mick, for holding on. You're a real patriot. So I'm bullish on the economy. You were telling me off air, you've been traveling around the world, dealing with business leaders around the world. It seems like America's back. What is the reaction of the foreign, when you meet with foreign leaders and foreign CEOs about what Trump is doing?
It depends on where you go. The Europeans really don't know what to do with him, and they really don't like him. They still
that's
don't.
Good. Right.
Yeah, and that's fine, because I think he's sort of calling out their BS. I mean, they have been BSing for a long time. When I go to Europe, I'm like, look, we just don't know if you folks are trustworthy partners for the long term. And if Greta Thunberg is the future of leadership in Europe, we got to go someplace else to have some friends, because you folks are going crazy. I mean, they're throwing people in jail for praying privately. In the UK, for example. So there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on. But no, there's a recognition that Trump runs things differently, and it's going to be different, and that it might be more than just Trump, and that this populism is real, and that this is not the trend. This is a tectonic sort of shift in the way America views the rest of the world.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, my column that I wrote a couple of weeks ago was on this, that I really believe, Mick, and last word on this, because we got to take a quick break. I think Trumpism is going to go international. I think you're going to see Trump-like candidates who are not tied to the arrogant bureaucracy, who are men and women of the people. I think that's going to be a trend around the world. What do you think?
I think people are waiting for government that's responsive to what they say. Populism is a response to government that doesn't do anything for them. Exactly. People don't feel like government's doing anything. Trump is following through. You love him, you hate him, I don't care. People do feel differently. I get that. Right. He's done exactly what he said he was going to do, and that is a breath of fresh air, and that may catch on internationally. Amen. That's Mick Mulvaney, who served so honorably as Donald Trump's chief of staff, the hardest job in the country. Mick, thanks so much for your service. This is the More Money Show. When we get back, I'm going to take your calls, 1-800-848-9222. If you have 5 minutes in the Oval Office with Donald Trump, what would you recommend he do? We'll be right back.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. All along the East Coast, by the way, it is absolutely gorgeous Saturday afternoon. And this is one of those days you're just happy to be alive and go out and have a great time because it's just glorious out there. I spent all morning playing tennis, and it was just wonderful with the bright blue sky and sunshine. I hope that's the way the weather is where you are, because we're all over the country, but mostly on the East Coast. All right. I told you that I would be taking your calls, and I'll take your calls in a few minutes. The question, of course, for the day on the More Money Hotline is, if you had 5 minutes with Donald Trump in the Oval Office, what would you recommend that he do? I was honored enough to spend about 45 minutes to an hour with Trump, one-on-one with him, and you may have seen that on Fox News and C-SPAN, but we had an amazing conversation. The guy is flying on all cylinders. I'm so proud of that president. And by the way, when I go in to see Trump, I tell him when I disagree with his policies. I agree with about 80% of what he does. I don't always agree with everything. And he takes the criticism well. And I don't know if I ever changed his mind, but I think I respect the fact that you can disagree with him and not get thrown out of the Oval Office. Two quick things before we take your calls. Number one, are you getting the hotline, the Unleash Prosperity hotline? I say this every week. If you're not getting it, come on. Why not? Why wouldn't you get it? It's absolutely free. It costs you nothing. We email it to you 5 mornings a week. All of the major policymakers in Washington, around the country, CEOs are reading it. Why aren't you getting it? Just go to unleashprosperity.com, sign up, just plus on hotline. Sign up. If you like it, I think you'll love it. It doesn't cost anything. There's no advertising, nothing. We don't sell your name or anything. We just want you to get this great information. More Money is the name of this show. The name of the address for this is unleashprosperity.com. Get the hotline. The other thing is, go to votewithyourfeet.net, votewithyourfeet.net. If you want to see what's going on in the country with people moving in and out of various states, you can see, I call it moving van economics, where the people are moving to, where they're moving from. And by the way, Jackson, we should get that domain name, movingvaneconomics.com, because it's the big story of America is people moving out of New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, and they're moving to states like Florida, of course, Texas, Tennessee, Utah, Montana, Idaho. Those mountain states are really doing well because they have low taxes. And of course, Texas, Tennessee, and Florida have no tax at all. New Yorkers, please pay attention to this. You've lost 2 million people over the last 10 years because of your high taxes, high regulation. Be careful, who you vote for if you're going to vote in the New York City election. Okay, we got a few minutes. Let us go to the phone lines. Mr. Producer, who is our first caller?
We have Ryan in Pearl River.
Ryan, thanks for calling.
Oh, hi, Steve. You have a great show. I'm a big fan of yours. And because of all the Americans that left New York City, we're going to have a commie mayor here in November. But if I was in the Oval Office and I was speaking to the president, Mr. Trump, I would tell him, without question, repeal the 65 Immigration Act, get rid of it. And all the illegals in the country have to leave because they're going to be problems with obviously with the census count. I mean, how are we going to do it? They're going to send 20 applications for each illegal. They have addresses all over the country, and that's a overthrow of my country too. That's immigration. People who support immigration, legal, illegal. They're the Benedict Arnolds of the 21st century.
Good point. So let me guess.
I would say.
Okay. Go ahead. One more. Go ahead.
And the thing was, I know people are obsessed with Fauci and Pelosi, their Italian last names, but the thing is, the Chinese communists sent that virus over here to destroy the Trump presidency.
I think so. I agree. I think that. Well, let me put it like this: I don't have hard evidence of that, but I'm certainly suspicious that you may be right. So let me ask you a question before I let you go on that issue of the immigration. So Trump wants to redo the census and not count the illegal immigrants. I wonder what you think of that.
You might as well go down to the ocean front and demand the tide don't come in. Come on. It's good. These people are scattered all over the place. There's millions upon millions of them all over here. We have to hold the countries they come from responsible for sending their people here. You send murderers and rapists here, that's not an act of war. I don't want the audience to think about that. But
Good point.
They're coming here legally. They're coming here legally with the visas, and they're overstaying the visas. You've been to the airport. They're coming from all the third world countries. They're laughing. They got visas, and they're overstaying those visas. That's how they're getting in now. No matter what they have to do.
Great call. I got to cut you off because we've got a bunch of other people on the line waiting. Appreciate the call, Mr. Producer. By the way, 1-800-848-9222 is the More Money hotline. Who is next?
We have Eloise in Oakland, California.
Eloise, thank you so much for calling.
Oh, hi, sir. I appreciate your show. I listen to it on Saturdays. I'd like the administration to make a decision about the daylight saving time change. Because it's been sitting around in Congress for years, and we all voted for it, and nothing is happening with that.
Well, wait, hold on. So let me ask you, Eloise, what is your position on this issue?
Excuse me, I couldn't hear you.
So do you want to get rid of daylight savings time?
No, I just want it to remain standard time.
Well, see, here's the thing. Here's my beef with that. I mean, I like daylight savings time because I don't like to get home from work at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon and it's dark out. So I'm in favor. What I would do is make daylight savings time the policy for the whole year.
Just decide one way or the other.
Okay.
So we don't have to keep switching. I mean, I like daylight savings as well once you get adapted to it, but always turning the clock back an hour and forward an hour.
Okay.
That's been happening like too long.
Great. Okay. Great call, Eloise. I appreciate your calling in because we have an agreement here, folks. The Eloise Moore policy that we're going to take to Donald Trump is let's make daylight savings time the policy for the whole year. In other words, let's not go off daylight savings time. I know some of you are going to object to that, but that's the way I feel about it. We have time for one or two more quick ones. Mr. Producer, do we have any more callers?
Yes, we have Jim in upstate New York.
Okay, you're on.
So my question for Mr. President Trump is your bounty on Mr. Maduro. Please get rid of Mr. Maduro. That is going to help the immigration, particularly with the drug trafficking and Iran connection. So please get rid of Maduro.
It's a great idea. Really great idea. And a great suggestion. Next time I see Trump, I will ask him of that. How are things in Florida, my friend?
Very good. I'm about to head in and work the Bucs preseason game. I'm on my way right now.
Well, Florida is when we did our votewithyourfeet.net, we measured where people are moving to and how much money people are taking. Do you know what the number one state is for bringing in money?
I'm living in it, Florida.
Yeah, Florida. You better believe it. Everybody's moving to Florida. It's amazing. By the way, you got a great governor there in Ron DeSantis. You're going to miss him when he leaves the governor's mansion. But what an outstanding job he has done. Thanks so much for calling in, sir. I think we might have time for one more caller. I know we got to people late. It's 1-800-848-9222 if you want to try to sneak in. Do we have any more callers, Mr. Producer?
Yes, we have Bob in Riverhead.
Hey, Bob, thanks so much for calling.
Yeah, thank you. All right, three things. The credit card interest rate should not be higher than the personal loan rate at a bank. That I don't understand. So I need to attack that. Take the cap off the OSDI Medicare tax so you can fix Social Security.
Wait. Hold on. You're talking too. Hold on. Stop. You're talking too fast. So what did you say on Social Security?
Take the cap off OASDI just like they did with HI. So you can fix Social Security.
That's a terrible idea. That's going to be the biggest marginal tax rate increase ever. Nobody's going to work. You're going to raise the marginal tax rate on working by, another 15%. That's a horrible idea. Why don't we just let people put the money into a 401k plan and let young people invest the money in the market and get a 5 times higher return than they get from Social Security?
Well, I suggest it only because the tax is relevant to the earnings. So if you don't want to pay more, you earn less. And so, and it's as a percentage of earnings, it's very little.
Yeah, but remember,
I think no gerrymandering.
You know what? I'm totally in agreement with you on this. I hate gerrymandering. You're so right. I'm so glad you called in. So you had one really bad idea and one really good idea. No gerrymandering. I want the computers to do it. Every state, you can just do a random number generator. The computers can draw the line. You just instruct them through artificial intelligence, put as many people in contiguous districts. Take the politics out of it. The politicians should not be able to choose their voters. The voters are supposed to choose the politicians. And what's happening in New York, what's happening in Illinois, what's happening in California, now they want to do it in Texas. It's awful. It's awful. It is taking the right of people to vote away from them by putting them in certain districts that they shouldn't be in. Folks, this gentleman is absolutely correct. I don't like it when Republicans do it. I don't like it when Democrats do it. Sir, you got my blood boiling. I'm so angry about this issue. Why is it in 2020, we're in the year 2025, we still have politicians choosing these districts and drawing these lines? They're crazy. They look like a dragon. You got people over here, over there, people 200 miles away from each other in the same district. I think it's outrageous. And I'm so angry about it. And there's no reason that we cannot have a better way to choose these congressional districts that takes politics out of it. All right, folks. All right. Coming up on the More Money Show, we have the great Rita Cosby from WABC. She's a good friend. I love Rita. I have the biggest crush on her. I've known Rita for 30 years. And we're going to talk about everything politics and economics. Thanks for listening, folks. We're having a great time on WABC on the More Money Show.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back, folks. This is the More Money Show, having a fun time on a Saturday afternoon. I hope you're all having a wonderful weekend full of sunshine and blue skies and just wonderful non-humid air. We had so much humidity over the last 3 weeks in Washington, D.C. It's all cleared. So it's after the show is over in a half hour, get out and have a great time outside. Get some exercise. And now this is the highlight of my day. I get to bring on a woman I've had a crush on for 30 years. We've known each other for a long time. The great Rita Cosby. Rita is, of course, who's, her from Fox News. She's been on Newsmax. She's on shows on everywhere. She's been everywhere. And Rita also is probably most famous for doing the Cats Roundtable. When Rita, that's on 5 to 6 every weekday?
Every weekday, Katz and Cosby, 5 to 6 o'clock with me and the great John Katzimatidis, and we also have the Rita Cosby Show, 10 to midnight. But
wow.
And
so hold on,
John
that
Katz
means
and I get to have you.
I know. Well, I'm just so you're on the radio 3 hours a night.
Yeah, 3 hours, and it's an action-packed 3 hours, Steve, because, as you know, there's so much to talk about. But before we get started, Steve, I got to give a shout-out to you, my friend, because I'm looking up at the White House feed, and there is President Trump, and you're presenting all the numbers and that great news about the median household income going up. And I said, there's my friend Steve Moore. I was so proud of you.
That's so funny. I mean, I was telling the story a little earlier on the show. I mean, I was in the meeting with Trump and all of a sudden he liked these numbers. He said, and all of a sudden he just says, let's just have an impromptu, press conference. Next thing I know, there's 40, press people and 20 cameras that are crowding into the Oval Office. And he's standing next to these charts and he just says, this is Steve Moore. He has some news for you. I'm like, hub.
You did a great job. And I told you the day before you had a great haircut when I saw you in studio with me and John. So that's why I said, good, he got a great haircut and he's looking good there.
Well, the Katz and Cosby Show is fun. I do it once or twice a week. It's just a fun environment. You guys are great doing the news. Okay, so the question of the day I've been asking all my guests and my listeners, and so I want to toss this one to you, Rita, is if you had 5 minutes of Donald Trump's ear, which I was able to do, I was blessed to be able to visit with Trump in the Oval Office, what advice would you give Donald Trump?
That's a great question. And actually, I've had great conversations with President Trump through the years. Yes. I'll tell you an interesting story. Very early on in his, before he announced he's running for president, President Trump and I were at an event, a personal event, and he said, Rita, what do you think about Iraq? We started talking about what was happening in Iraq. And, retrospective, do you think that was the right move going in? What are your thoughts? I was picking his brain. We ended up talking, quite a long time. And I've talked with him a lot through the years. I love President Trump.
Me too.
And I thought to myself, he's going to run for something big. I looked at him and I said, Mr. Trump, I said, Donald, you're running for something, right? And I said something big, and he smiled like the Cheshire Cat. And then, of course, the rest is history. And he went down the elevator, a bit after that. But I could tell. So the reason you ask, I think if I had his ear right now, I would tell him, A, to stay the course.
Right.
Because I do think so much of what he's doing is great work. I think also, I think he does need to figure out, obviously, what happens with the Fed chair seat, since we're talking on more money. Who's going to take that over? That's a big deal.
Now, do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite for that?
It's hard to say. I know.
How about our friend Steve Forbes or Larry Kudlow?
Oh my God, Steve Forbes or Larry Kudlow? Are you kidding me? Home run. And I think, by the way, either one of those two would absolutely be incredible. Yes. And I think any time to serve, even though they're both obviously doing very well, with their respective jobs right now. And of course, we've got Larry here at WABC.
I know, 3 hours.
Exactly.
Rita, Larry's my warm-up man because he's on from 10 to 1 and I'm on from 1 to 3.
That's a good warm-up. That's a great warm-up. So I think, first of all, I think solving that, and I also think keeping an eye, it's a hard balance, and it's an interesting point you said. If I have his ear, I saw him in the Oval Office, I think it was now March or April this year, and I popped in, he found out I was at the White House for something else, and he's like, Rita, come on over. And he gave me a huge hug. He's like, Rita, I love you. And that was a day where things were a little up and down with tariffs, because remember, it was still early on. And my advice to him there, as if he needs my advice, was stay the course. You're doing a great job. Hold true to your values. And I almost feel like there are many people who I would give advice to, no matter who they are, because I want the best for our country, and I want the best. But he doesn't really need advice. I feel like he is so clear on where he stands and what his mission is. And I think he's doing a great job. I thought at first maybe there were too many things on the plate between, obviously, with Russia and Israel and tariffs then getting thrown in and this. But it's actually shaking itself out. And he is a dynamo, as you know firsthand, and he is such a driver, and he's also such a good leader. Like even when I was there at the Oval Office, it's been a few weeks now, and it was amazing for me to see sort of, just how present he is on any little thing, like telling Susie Wiles this. Steve Witkoff had just come back from a big major meeting, talking about this, talking about there were 30 or 40 different people coming in and out, and he was clear, he was crisp, and I'm not surprised that when he sees a great idea like you, he can handle it and say, hey, let's come on out and let's announce this to the world's media, as you so eloquently did. So I think stay the course. And also listen to his inner self, because I feel like he has a good gut, and there are a lot of people pulling at his ear, especially when it comes to Russia, Ukraine. That's a big thing, of course, coming up this week with that meeting in Alaska on Friday. Stay the course. Listen to your gut. Because I do believe he's one of the only people in the world who can solve what almost seems like an insurmountable problem.
So, great. Well said. Couldn't say it better. So 2 other quick things before I let you go, Rita. And I know it's a Saturday afternoon, so thanks so much.
Oh, you kidding? I was so thrilled to be on with more money. More money.
Well, there you go.
Steve,
there you go.
Moore,
so,
I love you.
First question is with respect to you've been at WEC for a number of years now. John Catsimatidis, who's a good friend of both of ours, and you're next to him for at least 1 hour every weekday. He's done an amazing job with this network. It's incredible. It's the number 1 talk radio network in the United States, and the turnaround has been so amazing. And I wonder, because you know him better than I do. He's a good friend of mine. He's the one who gave me the show, and I'm so appreciative of that. What do you think it is about John Catsimatidis that makes him such an incredibly brilliant businessman?
Well, you know what? He is real. And he really does deeply, deeply care. And I think when he's making investments, whether it's from a business perspective, he thinks, okay, obviously what is smart. He has a great intuitiveness. As we were just talking about Trump, I feel the same with John. He is so brilliant. And just to give people a sense, and you've seen this, Steve, because you've been with us. We love when we have you in the studio every week. But it's amazing to me as we're about to go into the show, he's also dealing with an enormous, maybe major business deal, or he's dealing with some major world event, or he had dinner with President Trump last Friday. And here he is talking there with him about the border, about Mamdani, about the world. I mean, this is a man who has such an incredible life story, John. And yet he's also so humble and so real. And that's why I think the show is such a great success, that the two of us really speak from the heart. And I learn something every day when, I'm next to John and all the great people that we have in the studio like you. I don't think there's any show on the planet that has so many diverse. One day we have Pataki, and then we have Governor Patterson sitting next to him, or we'll have the great Steve Moore, and we'll have somebody else calling in from maybe Steve Witkoff calling in, or President Trump is called in, and I think it's a breath of fresh air in a time where people just want to hear the truth, and that's John's motto. It's sort of truth, justice, and the American way, but he lives and breathes it in every aspect of his life, and he's an extraordinary human being on and off air.
Well, I wish, and this leads into my second question for you, which, and by the way, he should be mayor of New York City. And unfortunately, it looks like New Yorkers may be making a very bad decision. I don't follow the race as close.
There's still time.
I know there is. So
there's still time.
Well, I'm in D.C., so I'm only up in New York once every couple of weeks. But I'm here to tell you, Rita, that I believe it would be a total disaster. I said this on your show the other night that I was on, that I believe New York will lose Wall Street if Mamdani wins this race. And so what do you think? Do you think it's time for – I mean, I want New Yorkers to come to their senses and see how dangerous it would be to elect someone like this who could – look, I'm from Chicago. I saw what happened there when they elected a left-wing socialist. He destroyed the city. I don't want that to happen in New York.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's interesting. On my late night show, on the Rita Cosby Show, I got a call the other night from someone in Cincinnati, and they were talking about what's going on with the mayor there. So there's a couple like kind of mini Mamdanis across America. And I love that you care so much about New York. And it's also really a national story too, Steve. I mean, even President Trump is watching the race. Everybody's watching the race, because the last thing we want, like you said, is a flight of Wall Street and a flight of big business people like the great John Catsimatidis, who owns grocery stores. And here is a guy who's talking about, government-run grocery stores, talking about trashing billionaires. And then let's not also forget the rhetoric, Steve. What I think is so concerning. I'm not Jewish, but I'm a big supporter of the Jewish people. My father grew up right outside the Warsaw Ghetto. And when I see this guy who has a trouble saying why it's a bad thing that globalized the Intifada, and he's hanging around with Mahmoud Khalil, who is the organizer of the Columbia University protest, who had a hard time condemning October 7th the other day. To me, this is a cauldron for disaster, and this guy is a true believer. Like some of these economic policies that we're talking about now, and also other policies, Steve, this guy doesn't just say it. Like sometimes, you and I have met so many politicians, right? They dance. This guy is saying it, and he's going to do it times 10. And I believe he will be a disaster. So to answer your question, we got to educate people. We got to get out there, and that's what we're trying to do every day on the show.
Well, we got a couple months left to do that, and I pray that it's a good outcome. I'm not going to tell people to vote for, but I think people just need to know what could
Anybody
happen.
but Mamdani. Anybody but Mamdani.
Well, Noel Cuomo would be pretty bad too, in my opinion. But nonetheless, hey,
and who knows? He may not stay in the race. I think there's going to be some dropouts.
All right, Rita, we got to take a hard break. You are a superstar. Thanks so much for coming on the show, folks. This is the More Money Show. It's WABC, and we'll be right back.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Thanks so much for carving out some of your Saturday afternoon to listen to the show. It's a great honor to be in front of this microphone every week from 1 to 3 p.m. on the More Money Show. At the very last minute, I called my good friend Kevin Roberts, who also happens to be a person who signs one of my paychecks at the Heritage Foundation. He is the president of the Heritage Foundation, which is the most important conservative think tank, probably the most important think tank, period, in not just the United States, but in the whole world. And Kevin, I called Kevin at the last minute because tomorrow is a sad day for those of us who are conservatives, free marketeers, libertarians, who believe in limited government and who love the U.S. of A. Because the great Ed Feulner, the founder of the Heritage Foundation, passed away not long ago. Tomorrow is his funeral. It's going to be a sad day for us because he was a great champion of freedom. And Kevin, first of all, thanks so much for coming on.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, Steve, albeit discussing a topic that both of us and millions of people around the world would prefer not to, which is the passing of our great friend Ed Feulner. For people who knew Ed, they knew him to be a tremendous intellect, but also, as you and I both knew firsthand, a tremendous friend. And for people who didn't know Ed, I think he's one of the underappreciated heroes of this generation, a real witness to freedom, to treating people well, to truth. Obviously, for those of us who believe that he's in a better place now, tomorrow will be both sad but also joyful to be able to celebrate a life well lived.
So Kevin is, Ed Feulner is famous for a lot of things, but most famous for being the co-founder of the Heritage Foundation back in, what was it, 78? What year was that Heritage
1973.
Yeah, 73. Wow. So this is and he built it from scratch. And as I said, is now, thanks in no small part to your great leadership, the most influential think tank in the world. I want to say something personal about Ed Feulner because I think it talks about the greatness of the man, which is that one of the things Heritage has done over the last, 40 years or so has been 50 years, I guess it's been, is to really put an army, intellectual army of young conservative scholars who then go into the White House, become key, aides on Capitol Hill. They're all over the place. You know that every time you turn around, you're reaching, talking to somebody in Washington who's an alumnus of the Heritage Foundation. And I think that was one. And look, he did that for me. I was just a snot-nosed 22-year-old kid out of college. And, he gave me my first job as a research assistant. And, look at me now. And I think about if it hadn't been for Ed Feulner, that first job could be the most important one. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Oh, I do. I think Ed started more careers or jump-started more careers in the conservative movement than anyone in modern America. He was someone, as you know well, Steve, who said that people are policy. And
yes.
for those of us, like myself, who were outside the world of politics and policy before making a career transition, we knew of that phrase. I mean, think of just from a management principle, how true that is. And obviously in our world of public policy and politics, it's so important because you can have the best ideas in the world. You can go to any public policy organization on our side and they generate really good ideas. But until you combine that, as Ed did in such an innovative way in the 70s and 80s at Heritage, with people who will go implement it, then it's almost useless to have the ideas. And so that combination is something that Ed perfected over many decades. He was the friend and confidant of so many leaders, not just American presidents, but international leaders. I think about the trip that Ed and I took last year to Taiwan, and I mean, he was treated as if he was, one of the founders of that.
Right.
Because he was just so good to them over the years.
Yes.
And all of that to sum up with this point, Steve, we already miss him dearly. He remained on our board until literally the day that he died. He was someone that you and I and so many people could call. You can't replace someone like that, but you sure can honor them, and that's what we're going to be doing.
So one of the issues that I feel that he had the biggest impact on, and he had such a wide impact. You're right. By the way, Taiwan, he was the best friend in the United States of Taiwan, and there's no doubt about that. He must have made dozens and dozens of trips over there. But I really believe he was instrumental, Kevin, and I'm talking to Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation. I believe Ed Feulner was instrumental with about 5 or 6 other conservative intellects in defeating communism.
Oh, there's no doubt. Very correctly, we think about the leadership roles of President Reagan, Prime Minister Thatcher, Pope John Paul II, Lech Walesa, others. But your point about 5 or 6 intellectual leaders, you had to have that intellectual foundation to understand that at its root, communism wasn't just a flawed economic system. It was immoral. It was anti-human. And Ed, I mean, think of all the different ways I might describe his legacy. The one that probably has had the greatest impact on the largest number of people is his role in helping to defeat communism. It's a remarkable legacy.
And then, of course, in the Reagan Revolution, I was there at Heritage in my first stint at Heritage during the 80s. And oh my gosh, it was really unbelievable. I mean, we'd be writing Heritage backgrounders and we get them, filter those right into the White House. And, the chief of staff of the White House was reading our stuff. And, sometimes, and by the way, one of the things I really have always admired about Heritage and up to this day is that, look, Ronald Reagan was one of our greatest conservative leaders ever. But when Reagan had a bad policy, we'd call him out on it. We'd say, this is the wrong president. And now that wasn't very often because he had such great instincts. But I always admired Ed about that.
No, it's so true. And it's something that I picked his brain about a few times already this calendar year, because obviously, Steve, you and I and the majority of Americans are so excited that Donald Trump has won a second term. He's doing a great job. But as I have explained to some of the president's senior folks as a friend, it's not our job at Heritage to say 100% of everything you do is right if we make so great, but we can be better friends if privately we say, this is how we would do this a little bit differently. That's one of Ed's legacies as well.
So Heritage has continued to be a major impact. By the way, congratulations on your huge role. You have a great team over there, E.J. Antoni and others that had a big impact on passing the Big Beautiful Bill. So congratulations to Heritage. What an important role. I think this is, I've been in Washington for 40 years. I think this is one of the 5 or 6 best pieces of legislation we've ever passed.
It's so true. And, thinking about the aforementioned president's senior officials, as I told them, I said, this changes the trajectory of government overreach in Washington, how business has been done. Heritage is very happy to support it. We're also very happy to go after those things, as you are, Steve, that can be improved still in terms of spending and additional tax reform. But the reality is, you've heard me say this in Heritage meetings, I believe in radical incrementalism. Let's go get done what we can get done. I'm not suggesting that this bill is incremental. It's massive in many respects. But if we have this attitude that we as conservatives are going to be a governing coalition for a generation or two, which I believe and which Ed believes, then I think we can really put in the proper context the one big beautiful bill. And we need to, as soon as Congress gets back from its recess, keep going after some of these spending cuts.
Well, it's really important because we got to keep the momentum going. Now, what are some of the top priorities that you're promoting right now at Heritage, now that you've got the Big Beautiful Bill done?
Well, we would love to see more rescission packages, more spending reform. We're basically want to see codified all of the president's executive orders. Steve, that for me and for all of us at Heritage, education is such a priority. And so we're doing everything we can to assist Secretary McMahon in dismantling education department for the purpose of improving education. But you also know we're extremely involved in immigration reform. It's such a blessing that we have operational control of the southern border again. But right now, I would say that our top priority, given that the bill has been passed, is to make sure that we break the back of these sanctuary cities, because it's in those sanctuary cities that we find housed tens of thousands of known felons who are here illegally. We have got to get them back to make America safer. And once we do that, then I think we're also going to be able to right-size the federal government. And to sum up here, my big passion coming from state policy is to see all of these red and purple states pass really good policy, fiscally conservative budgets, education reform. If we can do everything right in D.C., we also can make sure that we're revitalizing federalism. I think we've got an opportunity to have a massive renewal of the United States.
Talking to Kevin Roberts, who is the esteemed president of the Heritage Foundation, and we've been talking, doing a tribute basically to Ed Feulner, one of the great conservative minds and thought leaders of the last half century, who died recently, I think 10 days ago. His funeral is tomorrow. One of the things that Ed really felt passionately about also, and I met with him about 9 months ago, actually, about this, was just what we could do to expand school choice so that every child in America could have access to a great school. I know that's a huge priority of Heritage. I know it's a huge priority of yours. There is good news, as you know, Kevin, on this issue, where in the next couple of weeks, when kids head back to school, as many as 1 million kids will have access to charter schools, Catholic schools, private schools, voucher schools. That's a great step forward.
It's a huge step forward. And in fact, when Texas passed its near universal school choice bill, which Heritage had a huge hand in.
And you did, by the way, you were at, sorry to interrupt, but you were at Texas Public Policy Foundation. So I know you had until just a few years ago. So you were right on a front row seat on that one.
No, it's true. Those were the good old days when my great friend and your great friend, the Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins, and I were both at Texas Public Policy Foundation fighting for school choice. I called her the day that the Texas bill passed earlier this year because I said, you deserve, Brooke, so much credit for this. This is the point. When that bill passed, we woke up the next day with a majority of American school-age children living in states where school choice exists. Once we get to 100% of that figure, then I think what you're going to see is a tremendous renewal of education. But we're very well on our way there, Steve. And I think that is probably the most promising public policy reform of the Trump era because it has such long-term consequences for young Americans.
That's Kevin Roberts, the great president of the Heritage Foundation. Kevin, thanks so much for joining. I will see you tomorrow at this at the funeral for the great Ed Feulner. Folks, this has been the Money More Show. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And we'll see you same bat time, same bat channel next week.
Thanks for listening to More Money with Steve Moore. You can hear More Money with Steve Moore Saturday afternoons at 1. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. Just go to Indeed.com/PODKATZ13 right now. And support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 350 plus undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.